Justin has requested me on Patreon to review the film noir Too Late for Tears, released in 1949. It was directed by Byron Haskin, whose name may not immediately ring any bells, but he's actually directed quite a few famous movies and was quite multi-talented. He started his film career as a cinematographer in the early 1920s. After directing a couple of silent films right before Hollywood's full transition to talkies, he then spent several years working in special effects. He would receive 4 Oscar nominations for Best Special Effects and will be given a Technical Achievement Academy Award for developing a special background projector. He then returned to directing in the 40s, primarily making film noir, adventure, and science fiction movies. Haskin even holds a notable place in film history for directing Treasure Island, Disney's first fully live-action feature film. His other most famous movie was the 1953 adaptation of War of the Worlds, produced by George Pal, who would become a frequent collaborator of his. You don't hear much about the careers of directors like Byron Haskin, so I want to delve into that a bit before talking about Too Late for Tears, which is a pretty solid noir. The movie centers on a married couple who have a bag full of money accidentally thrown into their car, and while the husband wants to contact the police, the wife wants to keep it, which then sets off a chain of events. This is a familiar noir storyline involving plotting and scheming and the consequences of that, but what keeps the story engaging is seeing the effect of Jane's greediness on everyone around her. Elizabeth Scott plays the role of someone with few regrets over this dark path she's gone down and willingness to try anything to keep the money. The most interesting dynamic in the movie comes from the one she has with Danny, a man trying to get his own share of the money. Dan Doria initially portrays him in a slimy manner, but then the movie plays about expectations and turns him into a nervous wreck over the entire ordeal, as opposed to Jane's growing coldness. Danny's development was the most interesting of the movie for me. Most of the movie is set in the apartment where Jane, her husband Alan, and Alan's sister live. Thus, it gives the impression that Too Late for Tears was based on a play, but it was actually adapted from a novel by Roy Huggins, who would later go on to create television shows like Maverick and The Fugitive. The movie was a low-budget independent production, so they were probably limited with how many locations they could use. Too Late for Tears was produced by Hans Stromberg, who had spent many years at MGM, and after he was let go in the early 40s, transitioned to becoming an independent producer. However, this would be one of his last films, as it was a box office disappointment and would later fall into the public domain. Back to the story, I did feel the movie sagged around the middle part, as it devotes a lot of time to a man investigating Alan's disappearance and a romance he has with Jane's sister-in-law. Said romance was one I did not think added much to the story. Thankfully, things pick up again in the third act, with some exciting plot turns and big reveals, and we get a further reasoning for Jane's behavior. Overall, Too Late for Tears does present a fairly standard film noir, but through little character choices that provides intrigue. Haskin did bring as much atmosphere as he possibly could on the budget he had, particularly during the nighttime scenes. It's also unflinching in how it depicts Jane and her determination and bad side. Watching the movie, I cannot help but think if the Coen brothers had seen it, as it shares a lot of themes and plot progressions in common with their work. There are particularly shades of Fargo, with the death that follows and the pursuit of money, and how greed over those dollar bills causes someone to make some terrible decisions that ruin their own life as well as others get caught in that web. Of course, these are common film noir storylines, with Double Indemnity being a notable example. That one also involves a woman plotting with a man she just met to kill her husband for money and the effect this has on him, although that film would take the plot in a different direction. Alfred Hitchcock also liked stories of people putting together elaborate murder schemes. I don't know what it was about the 40s and 50s that made these kinds of stories popular, but filmmakers seemed to use it a lot during that period. These also served as cautionary tales about how you should not put money over marriage, although in films like Too Late for Tears and Double Indemnity, the problem comes from the wife's unhappiness with their present situation and taking the absolute worst possible route to resolve it. I personally was not familiar with Too Late for Tears, but I was happy to give this a watch, and the result was a solid picture. Like I said, the movie has long been in the public domain, so it's easily accessible, and if you've seen it, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for the request, Justin.